Hello, and welcome to the March for Science Earth Week Media Zone for a very special episode of Let's Get Vaccinated, the show where each week we deliver a healthy shot of science and facts. In case you don't know me, my name is Lucky Tran. I'm a biologist and science communicator based at Columbia University in New York, and I'm the managing director for March for Science. So, with the pandemic, it's been a difficult time for the world. But we are now starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel thanks to science and vaccines. But even with this powerful tool that could save so many lives, we need to recognize that it can also widen the gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots in this world. This is why we need to have conversations about vaccine equity. How can we distribute the vaccines around the globe in an equitable and just way? And to help us talk about this important subject, I'm excited to welcome a very special guest today, Dr. Mariângela Simão, the Assistant Director General for Drug Access, Vaccines and Pharmaceuticals for the World Health Organization. Hi, Mariângela. How are you today?
Hi, Lucky. Very well, and yourself?
I'm well, thank you. We really appreciate you joining us for this critical conversation. So maybe if we can start by sort of situating where we are with the pandemic globally, right? And I'm really speaking because I'm sitting here in the US, and it's sort of a strange situation because I think there's a dangerous misconception that's happening here is that because the US has access to vaccines, I think many people here pretty much think the pandemic is over because there's access, right? But that globally, that's not the case. Right now, worldwide cases have doubled in the last 2 months, and they're going to surpass the peak at the turn of the year, right? So maybe you could talk a little about where we are at the pandemic right now.
Absolutely. There are good things, great things about having vaccines available, but they also create a false sense of security in people, like you're saying, right?
Right.
And WHO is very strong in saying that you can't let the public health measures down because, and with that, I'm saying consistent mask using, hand hygiene, avoid crowded spaces. Even if you're vaccinated, you still need to take care because there are limitations to what a vaccine can do in the scenario that we have right now. So what we have seen in the 7 past weeks is an increase of the number of new infections globally, with a strong grip on some countries like Brazil, like India right now. Even some European countries are still facing the resurgence. And we also have the issues of the 5 weeks where we have an increase in deaths globally, right? So it's
Right.
not over yet. It's going to be over, but it's not over yet.
Absolutely. And so, given that what we're seeing around the world, this rise, this alarming phase of the pandemic, how is the unequal access to the vaccines impacting our ability to fight against the pandemic globally?
Now that's a super important question, because we tried WHO and the other international partners when this started last year, and we started thinking what would be a fair and equitable allocation of any good, be it a vaccine or a treatment. What would it look like for the world? We were very much basing our thinking in the past experience with H1N1, the vaccine. And you probably won't remember, and young people won't remember, but 2009, by the time that the vaccines reached low and middle income countries, the pandemic was over. The vaccine was all concentrated in high income countries. So we wanted to avoid that. And we also wanted to avoid what happened to HIV. And many of you will know that because HIV, we knew that this high potency therapy, the cocktail, the ARTs, the antiretrovirus, worked in 1996. And it wasn't before 10 years later that these medicines reached low and middle income countries that had a high burden of HIV. So we started thinking, trying to avoid that scenario. And what do we see right now? Now, we see that more than 800 million doses were used globally, and 81% of these doses were used in high-income countries and upper middle-income countries. So 81%. right? And you know what percentage went to low income countries, which means low income countries are the poor country, 0.3% of these doses. And so we are living on a in a period of huge inequities in access to vaccines. Right? And so this is the challenges we have right now. I can talk a little bit about why is this happening and what can be done to sort it out in a timely fashion. It cannot be sorted out next year. It has to be sorted out this year.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. And in terms of like sort of mapping the inequity, I've been seeing like these maps. I just want to show you this for a sec. This is from The Economist. And this is something that really alarms me, right? It's predicting when the vaccines will become widely available in different countries. And you can clearly see there's a big gap between the richer countries in the world and the lower income countries in the world. So, when you see a map like this, how does that make you feel? And why is this happening? Why are the rich countries, so far ahead in terms of gaining access? How can we accept something like this?
Yeah, we should not accept something like this. The world we're living in is an unfair world, but we need to fight with everything we can. And information in sessions like this is helpful to get people to talk about it and to think about it in different terms. Because we hear a lot, like during this pandemic, about the solidarity and so on. It's good to have solidarity, right? It's good. But you're also mentioned in your introduction, we also have the issue that this virus is so ubiquitous, right? Because it's
Right.
everywhere, right? It's in all countries. If you low down your guard, you have a resurgence. You have countries that are doing their best. When they think they can relax, something else happens and the virus comes
Yeah.
again. So what we say when we are saying that it's not enough to have solidarity. We do need solidarity. Solidarity is good, but it's also in countries' best interest to ensure that across the world there's access to vaccines, because that virus mutate. We're talking to scientists, and that virus mutate. But when they mutate on a on a very predictable manner and they become a variant, right? And they become a variant of concern, either because it's increased transmissibility, which is what we are seeing now with the several variants, maybe decrease in case fatality, we don't know yet. But so that means that if the virus goes unchecked, it may be that the vaccines that we have right now won't work anymore, right? So we need countries and policymakers and also people to think that it's a matter of self-interest to ensure that all corners of the world are covered. It's not only because equity in vaccines is the right thing to do, but it's also because it's the thing that needs to be done right now. Otherwise, we may live with this virus much longer than we should.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. And it is a misconception, right? That it's charity when richer countries sort of help other countries gain access. It really frustrates me because it's true. Our safety is bound up. We are a global community. A virus doesn't know borders, right? And these mutations will happen. There are variants. There are things that we need to be concerned about. So I think that is such a great, great point. And, sort of going on from that, I do feel like we know that equitable distributions of the vaccines globally is very important. But then when you look at nationally, how can we convince countries to share, right? Because countries have domestic concerns like the economy, like restless citizens. If a country can afford to vaccinate its whole population, why should it not do that and sort of give up some of its supply to other countries? How can we get across this, political, social barrier?
Yeah, no, it's highly politicized, and there's also a lot of the public, I mean, the political pressure on the governments to deliver vaccines for everyone, right? And then we need to work cautiously in terms that at the same time that each government wants to protect its own population, to what how can I say, English is not my native language, but let me think. How can you ensure that by vaccinating everyone in your country, you're gonna be free of this virus, you won't. Science is telling us this right now. So we need to think of this not as a charity, and not only to 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 think of the immediate results in your country. Because there's also another point, Lucky, because many countries that are going through crisis right now, they think that's an acute crisis. Everyone is going through a crisis right now because of the economic effects and so on. But a vaccine like the ones that we're using in this pandemic, they are not an acute response to a problem, right? They are an additional tool to conquer this, to end this acute phase and to lower the pressure on the health system. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and I think that people can help, people who are listening in can help in the advocacy that your country is better positioned in terms of access to medicine, to these vaccines. You should ensure that these gains are shared with as many countries as possible. And that's why WHO, together with the Vaccine Alliance, Gavi, and CEPI, which is the Epidemic Coalition, and other partners, Epidemic Preparedness Coalition, has worked on what we call the COVAX facility, right? Because we envisaged last year that if all countries had to go bilaterally, had to go and fight to get the vaccines on their own, it wouldn't work, right? And it's not working, right? Because you see the high concentration we have. At the same, so we do have this COVAX facility. It's like a consortium mechanism that can pool in resources, and that has now 192 countries and territories attached to it. But the problem we have, right, out of these 800 million doses that were distributed, used around the world, 38 or 40 million only were distributed to the COVAX facility. And that goes through many processes. While you have some countries that are vaccinating their young people who have less risk of dying, we have countries that have not managed yet to achieve what WHO is pushing very hard, that we should have two goals this year with this pandemic. Vaccinate all frontline workers, healthcare workers, right, to protect health systems and to protect people who are high risk of transmission, and vaccinate everyone who has a higher risk of dying or developing severe disease. And this is something that we know already, right? These are people over 65, and these are people who have comorbidities. So this should be a no-brainer that these people, the goal of decreasing the number of deaths and decreasing the pressure on the health system should be global goals. Right? But that's not the reality that we're seeing. The reality we're seeing is what you described. There's a huge pressure for vaccine nationalism. Like this is going to sort out the problem. It won't.
Yeah, it's something I'm really worried about, and something that I'm seeing, like, we have lots of public health tools it's not just vaccines, right? There are measures that we can take, masking, social distancing, that can help get the numbers down, particularly in well-resourced countries. So something in the US and maybe some other countries that I'm seeing that I'm worried is this focus on vaccines and gathering all the vaccines. Do you think that's creating, not being, using other public health measures and trying to, sort of, I guess, get all the vaccine supply? Is that creating a global burden? And maybe I'm just thinking it's something that the global community and citizens can do a bit better, is sort of advocate for different and comply with different public health measures so that there isn't such a stress on the global supply.
Yeah, it's super important. The two things. First, because the global supply right now is very unstable. Like you saw, everyone is seeing, right? Because you have the issues with, you see even these big bilateral agreements where high-income countries, rich countries, contracted early doses out of the big manufacturers, right? They contracted at risk last year. And even those big bilateral agreements are suffering delays in everyone is seeing that, right? AstraZeneca had problems with delivering in Europe, and then you have the J&J, and you have Pfizer decreasing the number of doses that was supposed to supply, and so on. So the global supply chain is still very unstable. Now we have the biggest supplier for the COVAX facility for low and middle income countries is the Serum Institute of India. And at this moment, we see a problem because India is facing a, a, a huge decrease in number of cases. So they are prioritizing the internal market. So we don't have a secure supply chain for vaccines right now, like that would guarantee that people in lower middle income countries could get access to vaccines, but also that in higher income countries, because the small markets are also, it's not only if you're a poor country or you're a rich country. Rich countries with small markets are facing problems in vaccinating, right? The vaccination is taking longer than expected, or they're facing problems also with supply. So we are living in a moment this year, in a context this year, where we do need very urgently to what we call to increase manufacturing capacity, right? And there are ways that this can be done, and this could ensure that all countries receive enough vaccines to attend their needs, to vaccinate healthcare workers, and to vaccinate people at higher risk of dying. But it takes a little bit of time, but this is an actionable thing. Now, there is capacity. We have the partners, one of the partners, CEPI, is working on mapping the fill and finish capacity. The fill and finish, you know that you have the bulk of the vaccine substance, and you have it ready, but then you need to put it in vials, right, to make it available to the health. So there is a constraint, there is a bottleneck in terms of fill and finish, and there is the possibility of managing different manufacturers who already produce other injectables, for example, so that we can mobilize fill and finish capacity. With that, you could have more vaccines available until the end of the year and decrease a little bit of the pressure. The other move that's very concrete, it would be for the countries who have secured large quantities of doses. You know, I don't need to name them, but there are several countries that have secured 6, 7, 8 doses per person, inhabitant, right? That these countries do make them available through this global mechanism, because these doses they're not going to last forever either. You know, there are problems with expiry dates. We know countries where doses are expiring, but they're not being shared. And part of it is also because of the contractual arrangements with the industry that doesn't allow you to donate these doses. So we're living in a moment that you need more understanding from countries that they should share the doses, but you also need industry to behave differently, right? You need industry to be flexible on the contracts so that these global public goods can be made available where they are most needed.
Absolutely. And I guess I want to sum up this conversation in terms of, I guess, what individuals and civil society can do, right? I know the WHO put out a vaccine equity declaration, which says, which both individuals and organizations have signed in. The March for Science was very happy to sign on, of course. We'll put the link in the comments for everyone watching so that they can do. But what would you say in terms of individuals and people in countries and civil society can do to speak up about this issue?
I think there are several things, and some of them I'm going to say, and they're already being done. I think the advocacy with Parliament, Congress, right, to make vaccines available to those who need them, it's super important, especially in the high-income countries. There are discussions right now ongoing on what's happening with intellectual property. And it's a lot of controversy around it, because at the same time that some people want to protect innovation, but that we, and Dr. Tedros, our boss here, Director General of WHO, he's been saying, if it's not in a time of an emergency, when you should think of wavering intellectual property rights, when would it be, right? When does the world need you most to create an environment that's where it's possible to share technology, to do easier voluntary licensing. This is the environment. WHO has launched last year, and we are having problems, and this is something that civil society could also help, which is the COVID Technology Access Pool. We call it CTAP, which was championed by Costa Rica and 40 other countries. And this mechanism is to pull in, not only bringing in industry and partners to share the knowledge, academic organizations, institutions, and so on, but also to voluntarily license the intellectual property so that you could have more manufacturers of the different things, diagnostics, treatments, and even vaccines. So there's a lot of things that can be done, and that the vaccine equity campaign is also championing, that people can get engaged and that can use, if you're vaccinated, fight for the right of other people in other countries to be vaccinated.
Yes.
That's what we need right now. That global solidarity becomes concrete, that goes beyond the discourse and moves towards something more concrete. If your country has more doses than it's needed, please advocate for them to be shared. If your country has manufacturing capacity, please advocate for government investment for us to increase manufacturing capacity. If your country is a high-income country, please advocate for funds to be put into the global mechanisms that will ensure that these vaccines or other products get to the hands and arms and of real people out there.
Thank you so much for that. And that's so true. The pandemic doesn't end when we get vaccinated. We must keep fighting for everyone's safety and health, right? So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much, Dr. Mariângela, for all your amazing work at the WHO and for being such an important voice for health equity around the world. Thank you for joining us today.
And thank you for doing the work that you're doing. Because what we do, if we don't work together on these complex issues, right? There's issues that I always say that this pandemic made what was bad worse, but it also gives us opportunities to work better collaboratively. So we count on you, on each of you, and you, Lucky, and the colleagues in your team. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for watching us today. Please remember to keep watching our Earth Week Media Zone. There's much more to come. And as we've been talking about today, please remember the pandemic doesn't end when we secure our own safety. We must keep fighting for the safety of others because no one is safe until everyone is safe. Thank you for watching, everyone, and bye from us.